Good morning and welcome back to the lecture series on performative gender and religions in South Asia. So, we are discussing gender and performance in the Sufi movement. We were talking about the figure of this Sufi saint, this figure of Sufi Baba in the Ansari sect or Ansari community, where he is a very heretical figure, not a very conventional figure of a mystic or a saint. He is thriving or his presence is felt more among the marginal subjects in a society, such as the women. He offers curative procedures or some curative potions for women. He is a go-between for the prostitutes and their clients, and then he also is a vehicle for entertainment. He is like a jester, right, who makes his audience laugh. So he's a very unconventional figure that is definitely a departure from the serious facet of religion, mainstream institutionalized religion that Islam is. So far from being perceived as an affront or an injury to gender sensibilities, in multiple contexts we see the Sufi Baba stands at the crossroads of belonging and alienation, a part of the Ansari community, yet someone who is ritually humiliated and ridiculed by the community, who laughs with the community, laughs or evokes laughter at himself because of his outrageous gender bending antics. He is at the same time a father and a husband, but also a perpetual outsider, a master of teaching weaving techniques to others. So they are, Ansaris are essentially a weaver community. So he is teaching the art and technique of weaving, but then he is also positing himself as a failure at mastering the art himself. So he is a master and a failure, a preceptor and a joker at the same time. So he posits a very complex, a very motleyed position. We were talking about this in the previous lecture. So through the multiple sites of self-configuring, a figure like the Sufi Baba among the Ansari sect, in the Ansari community, defies and challenges the community's perception of gender roles and human relationships. Next, we also have another heretical and a very radical figure, the case of a Khala who was a female disciple or murid of Nawab Sahib, the third peer of the Gudri Shah Chisti order. So she is a female mystic and she was a disciple, a murid of the third peer of the Gudri Shah Chisti order, and her story is chronicled in the book titled Women Mystics and Sufi Shrines of India. So her story is chronicled in the book titled Women Mystics and Sufi Shrines of India. Her gender bending activities are both instrumental and inherent to the spiritual station that the mystique has achieved, right. So we see this Khala's adoption of male clothing. There is a lot of transvestitism that defines the Sufi mystic. Here we see, we were talking about the different trans or transcension that inform a mystic. It could be transcension of any border, the gender border, the sartorial border in terms of clothing, in terms of gender, the religious and spiritual border. So they are transcending and adopting the traits, the the philosophy, the outlook of other religions, transcension of national borders. And so, transcending, being something plus, something over and above what is institutionalized, defines the mystic essentially. So here we see transvestitism, cross dressing, the Kala adopting male clothing, and her willingness to breach any kind of protocol and wanting to sit not only inside an all male mehfili sama, an all male sama or gathering where she wants to sit, and not only that, she would insist that she sits next to the Nawab Sahib, who presided over the entire event. This was interpreted by some of the disciples as an affront, as an outrageous act to the hierarchy of the order and to the gender norms in general, that would prohibit women from attending such assemblies, except for a few. So, Khala's position also can be mapped, can be traced as transcending the pre-given borders, boundaries, and codes and codifications in a society. Yet we see very interestingly that Nawab Sahib, the peer, right, of this Chisti order, is encouraging her. He interpreted her act as a sign of spiritual greatness. So for him, Khala's willingness to risk all kinds of social codes and social prescriptions in order to be near her master, to sit near the master, marked the traits of the true devotee. So he interpreted her not only the transcending but the transgressive behavior as a mark of a true devotee. It served as a testimony to her spiritual power and her genuine spiritual worth and her elevated status in the spiritual sense, her elevated spiritual status. So the story goes that a young disciple had physically assaulted and ejected Khala from the assembly because she wanted to sit beside Nawab Sahib and in an all male space. And later this disciple is known to have died from some unknown causes shortly after the affront. So Khala has been described by her sheikh as a very big saint, a great saint. And later we see how the insult meted out to a disciple or a murid also transcribes onto the murshid. If a disciple, a true disciple, is humiliated, the master is thereby humiliated too. The Nawab Sahib would be greatly offended at the Khala being evicted, being thrown out of the assembly, and so he also abandoned this Mehfil Khana, claiming that this assembly has been ruined now after her assault and could never be used for Sufi Mehfils again. So this episode, which is part of the oral history of the Gujri Shah order, underscores how the normal rules, the so-called normal rules of gender, should not be applied to the understanding, to the interpretation of extraordinary women who have transcended the limitations of gender. Far from being an anomaly in the Sufi circles, a figure like Khala, who embodies gender reversal, is a trope that is commonly found and which keeps coming back in the stories of, gender bending and experimenting Sufis everywhere. They are figures of transcension who are transcending and transgressing at the same time, and constantly doing so. Such gender inversions and defiance of the social rules that mandate separation of genders thereby locating men within a homosocial discourse into homosocial worlds uh, have become a part and parcel of the criticism uh, by the Sufis from within the Muslim community. And so the Sufis see this kind of gender segregation, space segregation in terms of gender, as something that needs to be criticized, that needs to be reformed from within the Muslim community. They call this type of behavior, this kind of classification, as un-Islamic and operating outside the the pale, the essence of Islam. At the Hazrat Lal Shahbaz Qalandar shrine, uh, which is located at Sevan Sharif, the woman Fakirini or caretaker is given the duty of offering water to the devotees. So the Fakiriani or the caretaker is in charge of offering water to the devotees. According to the Islamic tradition, giving water to the thirsty is a sawab or a charitable act, and the act of giving water to the thirsty is eulogized by many oral Sufi traditions as well. So the female myths in Sufi poetry represent the voices of marginalized groups, and it has been used as a representative frame. There are two things. One, we are talking about the women, the biological females. On the other hand, there is also the concept of the feminized male, the male singing in feminized voices. There are lots of instances where men sing qawwalis in feminized voices, where they are imagining themselves, they are imagining themselves as the bride of the god, right? So here the qawwali singers are the imaginary embodiment of a devotee who is seeking the attention of the male god. So both are mentioned commonly, and both are mentioned. So both are find mention in Sufi literature. The presence of women, the contribution of women, and the female saints themselves, like the case of Khala, and then the celebration of the feminized male, the feminized self within the male Sufi, right? So female singers perform Sufiana Kalam or mystical poetry at Sufi shrines and in concerts, in folk festivals, and domestic life, whereas male singers assume the female voice when singing the myths of heroines in Qawwali and in Sufiana Kalam. Like I was saying, here we are talking about two things: the celebration of female agency within the Sufi order, and then the celebration of the feminine self within the male himself. So Sufis have been time immemorially criticized as immoral or unconventional or a breakaway from the core Islam, for and this is because they welcomed women into their circles as disciples and as spiritual warriors on the same rank as the men. So the close relations that many Sufi men and women have enjoyed within the space of communal dhikrs, dhikr meaning dhikr referring to the roting or repetition of God's name, or mahfili, sama, or even during a celebration of the Urs, signal to the moral decline of contemporary Sufi practice in the minds of many of its detractors. So many, in other words, many, more conservative branches perceive the participation of women in all these practices, in dhikrs, in mehfil sama, in urs, as a general trend of decline within the Sufi circle. They are of the opinion that women should be segregated and kept in parda, right? So, yet we see that Sufis have always been known to challenge these kinds of ready assumptions regarding morality, gender, whether through scrambling of material notions of masculinity and femininity, through celebrating the spiritual virtues of males as the bride of God and females as men in the shape of women, or through practices in praxis with the uneasy and still contested acceptance of the female peers and caliphs. So, Sufism has constantly revisited these kinds of very fixed and kind of static positions that core Islam has assumed time and again. They have kind of reshuffled the fundamental notions associated with masculinity and femininity, and they have given importance, prominence and visibility to the female peers and caliphs. So, a few names of female Sufis have become known through the Tabaqat, the Tazkirat and the Malfuzat literature, through Nasab Namas and spiritual genealogies, and other forms of Sufi literary production. And recently there have also been some historical and ethnographic research on the female Sufis. So, we see next that among the Chisti Sufis and some other Sufi orders that exist in the Indian subcontinent, in South Asia, there has been a perceptible shift towards interfaith activism, and this is observable, this is available since the 1990s. And alongside this tendency to mingle with other religions, an emphasis on universalizing narratives that incorporate opportunities of demonstrating, of expressing gender equity. So, gender equity, interaction with other religions, becoming more liberal and more inclusive in general has been a trend that one sees in the Chisti Sufis and other Sufi orders since the 1990s. In the case of the Chishtis, the narratives drawing liberally upon elements of the lives of Muinuddin Chishti and Prophet Muhammad de-emphasize or move away from the question of Islamic authenticity, and they emphasize discourses and social actions which promote a vision of shared faith, a community of shared faith in the divine. So, they are basically shedding or getting rid of their rigidity. So, these two twin modalities, religious activism and then discursive production, highlight the ways in which narratives are being mobilized in serving the aims of the present society, the current world. So, bringing two genders in parity, as equal, and then the desire, the need for Islam to open up, to become all embracing, also interact with other religions. These are two imperatives that one finds operating at the heart of Sufi circles in the since the 1990s. Scholars suggest that some of the Sufi orders in the Indian subcontinent uh, since 1990s have begun recasting gender in ways which suggest, that the Sufi Niswa or Niswan, the women practitioners of the feminine equivalent to Sufi chivalry or fatwa. So, scholars suggest that some of the Sufi orders in the Indian subcontinent since the 1990s posit or recast gender in ways which suggest that the Sufi Niswa or Niswan, uh, the female practitioner of the from the Sufi cult, as equivalent to the uh, concept of Sufi chivalry or fatwa. So, the male practitioner and the female practitioner are perceived as, perceived as belonging to an equal platform. So, Niswan is the feminine counterpart to Fityan, the men, the male who practice spiritual chivalry. So, latest trend being that the Niswan or the female chivalry is being seen on the same level as the Fitwan or the male practitioner of spiritual chivalry. This recasting posits the women of the Sufi orders as active agents who are fully involved and participating in the social mission of the order, which in turn functions as a kind of symbolic capital that can give rise to transformations and transformative social actions. So, we see that Kelly Pemberton highlights the way in which the Gudri Shah Chishtis have turned the narrative of intercommunal harmony into the defining mission of their Sufi saint school. So, at the heart of the Chishti tradition or Chishti order is the mission for intercommunal harmony. So, it is founded by Pir Murshid of the Gudri Shah order named Hazrat Inam Hassan. Such discourses of harmony intersect with narratives of gender equality and social activism, making a mark of progress both in the spiritual sense as well as in the material sense. On both planes, it is making a progress. So, Pemberton studies the case of the Mez Bhandari Silsila that is located in Bangladesh, which is a classic case of intersection of Sufism with social activism, and it was founded in the 19th century by Maulana Sayyid Ahmadullah. So, it was founded in the 19th century by Maulana Sayyid Ahmadullah. So, in the Mez Bhandari Silsila, in this order, the gender and the specific, in the Mez Bhandari order, the gender and more specifically the use of a type of feminized masculinity is deployed to the service of two interrelated aims. The first aim being providing a counter example to a rising tide of discourses of hypermasculinity, something that is predicated on the linkages between power, hegemonic authority and public demonstrations of physical force. It is completely antithetical to that. So, Mez Bhandari Silsila is trying to focus on the feminized qualities of the male, the softer traits of the male, and it is a breakaway. It is a way of, it is a way of opposing the hypermasculinist tendencies, the exhibition of physical force and violence in the society. The second, aim of this silsila or order is offering a model of social reform which reinforces the importance of Quranic guidance and looking at Prophet Muhammad's figure as an example, as a guidepost for future actions. So, these ideas are articulated uh, within the notion of a Mez Bhandari darshan or philosophy. That this is at the heart of the Mez Bhandari darshan or philosophy. So, the hagiographic narratives of several sheikhs of the Mezbandari order link the language of inclusiveness with spiritual development. The Mezbandari website states that Hazrat Sayyid Ziaul Haq Mezbandari was a perfect model of Rabubiyat. So, this leader Ziaul Haq Mezbandari was a model of Rabubiyat both in action and in spirit. He was a philanthropist. He loved all people regardless of their sex, caste, creed and religion, and that is the model path that the silsila is trying to show to the common people, to the commoners. The Mezbandari order could be understood as signaling a type of feminized masculinity in order to fashion a progressive minded mission which has social and economic implications for forging alliances with uh, other non-Muslim groups globally across the globe. So, the kind of feminized masculinity that Pemberton refers to here is founded upon and draws heavily on the model of prophetic sunnah, right? Prophetic sunnah, by which Prophet Muhammad is understood to embody both ideal masculine and feminine characteristics in his leadership of the Islamic community. So, the who is the ideal person? That is what the prophetic sunnah is trying to describe. The ideal person is beyond, the biological demarcations of male and female. The person, such a person possesses. So, such a person possesses the perfect qualities of both the masculine and the feminine, and can thereby become a leader for the people. So, feminized masculinity facilitates a total submission to the will of God and fulfillment of the prophetic imperative to deliver a message of salvation. So, submission once again is the meaning of the word Islam. We have to hearken that back. Salvation is achieved not just through acts of piety, but through attention to the needs of the most vulnerable members in a society. So, a mission which evokes the divine quality of Rahim or mercy. We are not celebrating, aggression. We are not celebrating here domination or, the macho power. Here we are celebrating Rahim or mercy. It draws on the notion of the idealized feminine in Sufism, which points towards the ideal of ego destruction, because ego is at the heart of all differences, all wars and violence. So, it is pointing toward, it is suggesting ego destruction and a loss of self to which the Sufi seeker aspires in his search. What is this journey about? The Sufi journey is about, repudiation, about giving up on worldly affairs, giving up on ego for a direct experience of the divine, and finally annihilation within it. Fana. Fana means self-annihilation. And what is self-annihilation? It is not destroying the body. That is a very vulgarized understanding of self-annihilation. It means losing the sense of self, losing ego, and thereby becoming one with the God. That is fana, or destruction of the sense of self, sense of ego. So, the hagiographic narratives surrounding the life of the fourth peer of Mez Bhandari Sufi order, Ziaul Haq, suggest him as a man who embodied some of the classical characteristics of spiritual seeking and loss of selfhood. So, his spirituality was centered on loss of selfhood. So, in the imaginary of both the state and the social actors, the Sufis, make up or constitute a significant force for social change, and their political interception or political contribution lies in awakening, in provoking the moral force, in pushing forward the moral force that they embody, which is largely connected to their status as social and spiritual elites. We are going to continue with this discussion in our next lecture. Thank you.